Yay, happy President's Day. It's Washington's birthday. Time to stand up. Stand up. Yeah, it's a federal holiday, the third Monday of February. Are you taking it off? Did you get it off? I am here. I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm happy to start yet another week, the second to last week of February. Riding shotgun in your life, trying to figure it all out together. I hope that you'll meet me in Las Vegas. Meet me in Vegas, baby. March 22nd, 23rd. Come a little early. I'll be getting out there a couple days. Even before that, we'll go for a hike. We'll hang out. We'll have some drinks. We'll party. It's going to be awesome. Join us for Pod Jam. For more information and tickets, go to the show notes for this and any episode. Joining me on today's show, it's Big Barry Ritholtz of Ritholtz Wealth Management, the author of Bailout Nation and the host of a very popular radio program and podcast, Masters in Business on the Bloomberg Network. Ritholtz and I start our conversation at 24 minutes into the show today. But first, it's your news recap from the weekend, and a wild weekend of news starting on Friday,
when we learned that Alexei Navalny, the most prominent critic of Vladimir Putin in Russia, has died at the age of 47. Officials said Navalny had, quote, fallen ill while on a walk, but offer few details. Lots of questions about his death. I'm sure we will learn more, but I've been reading some reporting that apparently he died much earlier than was reported that day. Opposition leaders say that he was killed by intelligence agents at the behest of Russian President Vladimir Putin, and his spokeswoman, Alexei Navalny's spokeswoman, Kira Yarmysh, says that Alexei Navalny was murdered. The whole world knows the president of Russia personally gave this order, just as it knows that Alexei was never afraid of him, never stayed silent, and that he never stopped acting. President Biden said Putin was likely responsible. The dissident and political prisoner Navalny was being held in a prison near the Arctic Circle, where he was subjected to harsh punishment, had recently been sentenced to 19 years on charges of, quote, extremism that his supporters said, of course, were fabricated. Navalny began his career as an anti-corruption blogger and rose to prominence leading protests against the Kremlin. I'll have a couple of audio clips responding to the news of his death after these headlines. And let's see. For the next one, let's stay overseas, talk about the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. Here are some of the headlines related to that. Israeli airstrikes that hit central Gaza on Saturday killed at least 68 people, according to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital to CNN yesterday. Gaza officials said 5 patients died because of power outages during an Israeli raid of the hospital there. Israeli officials said that the raid led to arrests of 20 militants who participated in the October 7th attacks. I suppose both things could be true. Israel's defense minister said that Israel wouldn't try to force Palestinian civilians from southern Gaza into Egypt. That seems great. Also, apparently, Israeli forces covertly attacked 2 Iranian gas pipelines this week, an escalation of the two countries' shadow war. The World Health Organization said that the Nasser Medical Complex, which is one of Gaza's last functioning hospitals, can no longer serve its dozens of remaining patients as the Israeli military siege there continues. The foreign minister of the country of Jordan says Israel is responsible for the mass displacement of Palestinians, and Israel has summoned Brazil's ambassador after the president of Brazil, Lula, likened Israel's actions in Gaza to the Holocaust. So they're not very happy about that. All right, let's take a look at the other major war, this one, of course, in Eastern Europe. And the headlines out of the Russia invasion in Ukraine is that the fall of a major city, Avdiivka. And what does that mean for where the war is at? Avdiivka, a longtime Ukrainian stronghold, some of the most destructive fighting of the war, apparently. Ukraine in its most precarious position since the opening months of the war. And now the Russian flag flies in Avdiivka. European leaders are appealing for greater support for Ukraine as Russia's making this major gain. The Danish prime minister says the sense of urgency is simply not clear enough. Hillary Clinton said reality should have overcome any pushback from U.S. House and funding or support of the war-torn country. Bulgaria's prime minister says he believes politicians are beginning to recognize the urgency of the reality, but it's now up to them to convince their electorates too. The Danish have committed to send its, quote, entire artillery to Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky has invited Donald Trump to come see the war for himself. The war is entering, depending on when you started it, you could go all the way back to 2014, but the war is entering its 721st day. And I'll keep a close watch on it here, of course, as well as the domestic policy and whether or not we are going to support Ukraine. Republican Speaker of the House, Christian nationalist Mike Johnson, has blocked war aid for Ukraine so far, ignoring the president and the rest of the world's plea that passing the bill was vital to stand up to the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Other big stories I'm watching, following, and want to share with you because I think they are impactful and matter. That's the editorial preference here in the headline segment of Stand Up. Senator Joe Manchin And man without a face has announced he won't run for president this year as a third-party candidate, says he doesn't want to be a deal breaker or a spoiler. Apparently, he went on a listening tour, and 4 people showed up. So that's pretty big news, though, nonetheless, because that could have been not great for President Biden and the future of democracy. The leader at a Kellogg's factory in Omaha is now running for the Senate as an independent in deep red Nebraska. I thought that was an interesting story. You can look him up. His name is Dan Osborne. He led a strike in 2021 against the Kellogg's plant in Omaha. Now he's challenging Senator Deb Fischer as an independent in deep red Nebraska. She is Nebraska's Republican senior senator, and it's a long shot bid, but it will be an interesting test of the rising power of an energized union movement, according to the New York Times. I thought that was an interesting story to mention. Oh, and this is a nice story out of Nashville, Tennessee. Over the weekend, a group of neo-Nazis holding giant swastikas and wearing black balaclavas masks because they're cowards. Red shirts carrying swastika flags were marching through Nashville, Tennessee on Saturday. The group was also seen giving the Heil Hitler salute and yelling all kinds of racial epithets, believed to be members of the white supremacist group called Blood Tribe. So tell your friends about them. Politicians across Tennessee took to social media to condemn the masked men who waved Nazi flags, but that's a fun headline to mention to you. Now, let's head down to Brazil. I wanted to tell you about their public health emergency. They got dengue fever. Is that how it's pronounced? I should look that up. And this is a crisis that does not portend well for the Americas, but record numbers of cases of the mosquito-borne virus have been reported in the southern hemisphere's summer. That's now. The surge likely to move north for hours. Fantastic. There have been 425 deaths under investigation for the viral infection this year, 75 confirmed compared with just over 1,000 for all of last year. Now, real quick, this is a viral infection transmitted to humans through the bite of infected mosquitoes. Frequent rains and high temperature, which accelerate the hatching of mosquito eggs and development of larvae, make the famously hot city of Rio especially susceptible to outbreaks. Many who are infected develop symptoms, but basically can cause really high fever, headache, body aches, nausea, and rash, according to the World Health Organization. Ask Bill B about it. His wife got it when they visited South Asia a couple of years ago. Most folks get better after a week or so. Some develop severe form that requires hospitalization, can be fatal. Sounds terrible. Hope it doesn't come up here, but I do want to mention what's happening in Brazil. I'm seeing a few headlines saying that the Biden administration is slowing the shift to electric vehicles because they're facing pressure from both organized labor and the Detroit automakers. The Washington Post says the Environmental Protection Agency is considering relaxing one of its most significant climate change rules, tailpipe emissions limits for cars and trucks, by giving automakers more time to boost sales of electric vehicles. Rather than mandating a rapid increase in EV sales in the coming years, the agency could delay these requirements until after 2030. The move comes as the Biden administration faces pressure on multiple fronts to weaken its electrification targets, in part because of slowing EV sales and also problems with public EV charging stations. And the Washington Post quotes the director of Safe Climate Transport Campaign at the Center for Biological Diversity, a guy named Dan Becker, who's urging the EPA not to delay the timeline for transitioning to EVs. He noted that gasoline and diesel-powered trucks and cars are one of the country's largest sources of the greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. Very important story I'll be reading into more. I may invite Dan Becker or another environmentalist on to take a look at it from that angle, of course. But this is politics. I think this is about union jobs, and there's not as many needed in electric cars. So that is always a difficult hurdle for any politician at any level to have to navigate. But we are running out of time with our climate emergency. So an important story to follow. We'll see what happens and how it affects the presidential election. What else can I mention? Last night you had the 77th British Academy Film Awards. The Daytona 500 was postponed because of rain. The race will now be on President's Day, the first time that's happened since 2012. And you'll probably hear about this week, you got the Conservative Political Action Conference beginning Wednesday. That's CPAC, and apparently Trump is going to be there. So will be the new president, the president of Argentina, Javier Milei. They're confirmed as speakers. That has become a real extremist event. The International Court of Justice will be holding public hearings today on Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. And on Saturday, South Carolina will have the Republican primary election. So that is what's coming up this week. And those are your headlines. Nobody does it better than me. You know, I covered it all. There's nothing else you need to know about today. You are welcome. Nailed it again. Now let's get to some of the audio clips I found for you. It's time for sound bites from the Sunday shows and more. Let's start with Liz Cheney, who was on CNN. Former Congresswoman rolls out a pretty harsh new talking point. The Putin wing of the Republican Party takes that for a ride. I think it's going to be effective. And in this clip, she's talking about what will happen if Trump were to become president again when it comes to NATO.
He's basically made clear that under a Trump administration, the United States is unlikely to keep its NATO commitments. And I think that Republicans who understand the importance of the national security situation, who continue to support him, are similarly going to be held to account. You know, when you think about Donald Trump, for example, pledging retribution, what Vladimir Putin did to Navalny is what retribution looks like in a country where the leader is not subject to the rule of law. And I think that we have to take Donald Trump very seriously. We have to take seriously the extent to which, you know, you've now got a Putin wing of the Republican Party. I believe the issue this election cycle is making sure the Putin wing of the Republican Party does not take over the West Wing of the White House.
The Putin wing of the Republican Party does not take over the West Wing of the White House. That is quite a way of saying it, of thinking about it. Liz Cheney on CNN yesterday. All right, and here is the last remaining candidate running against Donald Trump, the woman who is going to stop him. It's Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina. The primary is this Saturday. She was on ABC's This Week with Jonathan Karl, who asked her if she were president right now, how would she engage Vladimir Putin and Russia's aggression? And for a moment here, she sounds like a somewhat normal primary candidate criticizing her opponent. But wait till you hear the next clip. This first.
What would you be doing if you were president right now? How would you make Putin pay for this?
I think it's important to stand with the Russian people who believe Navalny was really talking for them. I mean, you look at this hero, he was fighting corruption. He was fighting what Putin does. And what did Putin do? He killed him, just like he does all his political opponents. And I think that's very telling. But this goes back to the fact that we need to remind the American people that Vladimir Putin is not our friend. Vladimir Putin is not cool. This is not someone we want to associate with. This is not someone that we want to be friends with. This is not someone that we can trust. And so when you hear Donald Trump say in South Carolina a week ago that he would encourage Putin to invade our allies if they weren't pulling their weight, that's bone chilling, because all he did in that one moment was empower Putin. And all he did in that moment was he sided with a guy that kills his political opponents. He sided with a thug that arrests American journalists and holds them hostage. And he sided with a guy who wanted to make a point to the Russian people, don't challenge me in the next election or this will happen to you too. We have to start waking up to what this means. And that's why the importance of making sure that Ukraine wins is clear, because we have to prevent further war. And right now, Putin is feeling more emboldened than he ever has.
Yeah, I have no problem with that analysis and that critique at all. It sounds responsible, it sounds accurate, and I certainly can't take too much issue with it. But then she becomes not serious again in this moment at a town hall where she was asked by someone in attendance if she would pardon Donald Trump if she were elected. And then she doesn't seem serious at all.
Thank you very much.
Hi, John.
Governor Haley, if you were elected president, would you pardon Donald Trump if he was convicted of a crime in federal court?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, if you're talking about pardoning Trump, it's not a matter of innocence or guilt at that point, because that means he would have already been found guilty. I believe in the best interest of bringing the country together, I would pardon Donald Trump, because I think it's important for the country to move on. We've got to leave the negativity and the baggage behind. I don't want this country divided any further. I don't think it's in the best interest for America to have an 80-year-old president sitting in jail and having everybody upset about it. I think this would be the time that we would need to move forward and get this out of the way.
All right, there you go. Wow. Okay. I don't know how that helps us move forward, but here is her old friend, Tim Scott, who Nikki Haley's son apparently called Judas. Anyway, I was watching Face the Nation on CNN live when I heard this, and I thought I got to clip that out for the show.
Thing here, speaking of name calling, you say focus on the issues. Should former President Trump stop calling Ambassador Haley Birdbrain?
Well, I think her son should stop calling me Judas Iscariot. So there's lots of things that we can talk about, but let's just keep our focus on the American people and why it's so important for us to, as elected officials, to focus on their issues. One of the
It is
speaking of name calling,
it's just hilarious that Nikki Haley's calling him Judas, who, of course, betrayed Jesus. Sorry. All right, this next clip is Jonathan Karl over on ABC News talking to his panel, and he includes some great audio of Republicans who were relying on a witness to impeach Joe Biden, who has now been arrested by the Department of Justice, by the FBI.
And let me get to it. There was a major development this week with the indictment of the FBI informant that had said that Biden had been taking bribes related to Ukraine. The indictment said that this informant was lying. Now, let's remind everybody, this was a big part of the Republican case against Joe Biden. Take a listen.
Even a trusted FBI informant has alleged a bribe to the Biden family.
A highly credible FBI source alleges that Joe Biden received $5 million in exchange for pressuring for the firing of a Ukrainian prosecutor.
We also found a Form 1023, an FBI form alleging Joe Biden took a bribe.
Well, that Form 1023, Ramesh, was apparently a lie, at least allegedly, according to the former Republican Trump-appointed U.S. attorney. So what?
All right, now let me take it back and bring you to Kirsten Welker on Meet the Press, asking the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee what he thinks of that. Should they still go forward with the impeachment? And here is Mike Turner saying, oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. That doesn't matter. That our key witness has just been arrested for lying.
A former FBI informant has been charged with lying about Joe and Hunter Biden seeking millions of dollars in bribes from a Ukrainian company, allegations that are really central to the Republicans' effort to impeach the president. Now, you voted to support this impeachment inquiry. Do you think it's responsible to continue this inquiry given these charges against this FBI informant?
Absolutely. I mean, this inquiry, and it is an inquiry, is based upon actual bank records, documents, transactions.
Oh, it's hard to take. But you know what? There's more. I guess I got to let you hear him make the rest of his case, even though there's no case at all.
Of money, large sums of money. And doing an inquiry as to, how these funds got to the Biden family from international sources, China, Russia, Ukraine. That is certainly an issue that Congress needs to take up, and I think the investigation will continue.
But Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan said just a few weeks ago that the most corroborating evidence comes from this informant's allegations, and they are at the heart of the impeachment case. Even before that, Senator Lindsey Graham said to me, there's no smoking gun. So can you justify continuing with this impeachment inquiry?
I think you have to continue until it reaches its natural conclusion. But I'm not surprised at all that a business associate and associate of the Biden family might be untruthful. But we'll just have to continue to see what the bank records, the transactions.
All right, that's all I can take from Mike Turner. The impeachment's going nowhere. That's why he even said at the beginning, it's an impeachment inquiry. Nobody is going to vote to, lots of Republicans would vote to impeach Joe Biden without any case at all, but they're not going to get the majority of them, and they need every one of them. Joe Biden will not be impeached by the House. You heard it here, which means nothing, because I have no credibility on predictions, as you know, but I just want to say it with a tremendous amount of confidence, like any one of these asshole radio people. Trigger alert, I'm about to play 8 seconds of Ted Cruz with pure uncut projection. And I've cut it to 8 seconds, so it sounds, if you hear him say it, it sounds like he's talking, of course, about the Republican Party, but he isn't.
They're willing to weaponize the Department of Justice. They're willing to utterly abuse government power to try to stay in power.
Over the weekend, keep that trigger alert going, because the disgraced former president Donald Trump went to SneakerCon, which is a big convention for people who are sneakerheads, love sneakers, collecting sneakers. He was met not only with boos, but also "Let's Go Biden" chants. And then there's "Let's Go Biden," and then there's the boos. And just remember, here's Ron Filipkowski putting it plainly. Every Trump appearance and event is carefully staged and scripted by his advanced team, which is always really good at what they do. They set up, they control the optics, they have people there to cheer him on, arriving, leaving. On very rare occasions like this one at SneakerCon, he has eye contact with everyone else and gets booed. Here he comes, 16 seconds. Trigger alert, Tina.
Wow. A lot of emotion. There's a lot of emotion in this room. Thank you. So the really nice thing is we have lines, and I want to thank Chase and I want to thank Alan. But we have.
Okay. Yeah, there it is. Awkward, huh? Or also awesome.
Oh, a lot of emotion. There's a lot of emotion.
There's a lot of emotion in this room. You're not being nice. May he be booed everywhere he goes for the rest of his life. Won't happen, but I love it when moments slip through like that. All right. Well, last night, Season 11, Episode 1 of the best show in all television, HBO's Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, premiered. And, of course, I am the audience warm-up comic, and it's an amazing episode. And I brought that up because I thought there was a clip I could share with you, but it won't be out till 11 p.m., and I got to wrap this baby, so I guess my comedy clip will have to come from. How about this? Comedian Trey Crowder's latest car rant. So good. 2 minutes on Republicans flipping on Russia and Putin. So well explained and hilarious as always.
Used to be every American understood that Russia, or at least the Russian government, was our enemy, right? At least until the Cold War was famously ended by renowned pugilist and diplomat Rocky Balboa. That's how it was. Yet today you have American boomers who grew up in that era openly supporting Russia all the time. Why? Well, it's at least partly because Daddy Trump says so, of course, but it's also partly because they've identified Putin as being anti-woke, and that's kind of all that matters. Sure, Russia has long opposed the foundational precepts of our democracy, but these MAGA types see Putin over there saying things like, in Russia, we have only 2 genders and no black people. And they're like, say less, buddy, that's all I needed to hear. Right? That's like, Jesus Christ, nobody let these people find out how much jihadists hate the gays, or else things are going to get real weird around here. There's a couple things going on with this, right? First of all, the infamous interview. Never thought I'd be rooting for Putin to hurl a journalist out a window, but then I watched him sit across from Tucker Carlson's fart-smelling face for a couple hours, and I was just like, please defenestrate this man. But he didn't. Guess he thought it was better to just lie to Tucker and his legions of useful idiots. They ate it all up. Putin sitting there in an interview like, Russia would never invade Poland. Do you have this in America? Do you do this? Putin's doing that because he wants us to stop funding Ukraine, and he very well may get his wish on account of the tire fire big top shit show that is the GOP House. House Leader MAGA Mike already said they weren't going to vote funding because it doesn't include border support. It's like, what? Y'all killed the border support that y'all also wrote. But they don't want to fund Ukraine. Again, y'all, back in the day, if Russia so much as made another country sandwiches, we'd send a whole ass army over there and start shooting everybody till they switched to cheeseburgers instead. But now that Russia's invaded an ally that just so happens to have once hurt Trump's feelings, now all of a sudden the party of hawks thinks war is a waste of money. Okay. And Trump himself publicly said that he would let Russia do, quote, whatever they wanted to any of our NATO allies. And his insane supporters lap that right up like they do everything else. Y'all, now more than ever, I wish we could somehow take the younger 1980s versions of these current day papaws and bring them forward in time so they could whoop their own asses for somehow forgetting both that Donald Trump was naught but a laughable silver spoon douchebag and Ivan Drago was the bad guy. Love y'all.
Love y'all. I do too. Well done, Trey Crowder, liberal redneck. See him live, everybody. I got to get him back on the show. All right, now it's time to get to today's featured guest. You love him, you hate him, but you can't get enough of him. Nobody hates him, but some people think he's an arrogant rich guy, which of course everybody in finance is. So I feel like that goes without saying. But at the end, I tease him about that. So those of you that like that, you'll enjoy this one. Barry Ritholtz, everybody. You should listen to his podcast, Masters in Business, on the Bloomberg Network or wherever you get your podcasts. Ritholtz.com is the website. He, of course, is the co-founder of Ritholtz Wealth Management Firm, the author of Bailout Nation. You should follow him on social media. We love when he joins the conversation here. And we began by talking about he caught my comments at the Board of Education last week, and he's pretty fired up about it, so I kept that in on the interview here in the first, 10 minutes or so. Love Barry Ritholtz. Let's do it right now.
Oh, yeah. I reached out to him and said thanks. That was nice.
Yeah, no, right. It's are these idiots really chanting pederast?
I got called. I'm recording now.
Yeah,
I've been being called a pedophile, and I've been called a sexual predator, a child abuser.
What a bunch of cowards! And just seriously, I think that you should be able to resolve your issues without name calling or anything like that. And that's why all these people should be killed. I mean, that's the, so it's just like, oh my God, everything is as junior high school. When did society revert back to junior high school?
It's
name calling and bullies and idiots. And
but do
you not understand the basic concept here? It's
to be fair, it's effective. It's
if you shout down your opponent, sure.
No, but I think that Donald Trump particularly gave cover to and showed the effectiveness of name calling. It's now everybody does it. But I think maybe you disagree, but like worse than a racial epitaph or something sexist or some anti-religious kind of name, to call someone a child abuser, a sexual predator is the worst because it's dangerous because if I thought you were abusing kids, I would try to stop you. So
can we curse a little bit?
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Someone in public calls me a pedophile. That fucker is spending the rest of their life defending themselves in court. I will bankrupt them. Their children will never be able to own property in the United States.
I would love to think that there were legal. You know what they said actually about me?
No one wants to spend the money on it. You have to be crazy to spend that much money on lawyers. I will fuck those people up for life. That's mine. And I really shouldn't be saying this, but there are certain rules, certain lines in the sand. Once someone crosses, it's just scorched earth and we're done.
I should have stopped.
I was once sued by a former employer who was totally in the wrong. And I said to him, listen, let me just be really upfront. I'm going to lay my cards on the table. You guys aren't very especially smart. Your lawyers suck. And when we're done with this, you're not only going to get kicked out of the industry, but you're going to be banned for life. And some of you may end up in jail. Do yourself a favor, take the loss and walk away. And they refused, and everything I told them would happen happened. I don't go nuclear like that often, but there are certain things that if you cross that line, you got to bring the pain. Otherwise, you're setting a terrible example. Yeah, this is a terrible way to start our recording. You should delete all this. This is like so hostile and negative. Let's redo this.
All right, welcome to Stand Up Pete Dominic. Joining me now, Barry Ritholtz. And plenty to talk with him about today, including the fact that I got called a pedophile. How does that make you?
Dude,
well, here's something worse.
You're being like when you're heckled as a comedian.
Well,
it's an occupational hazard.
Sure. Yeah. I love it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you have and I have a thick skin about certain things.
In 20 years of doing stand-up, no one has ever called me a sexual predator or a pedophile or a pervert or anything remotely close. And
I think these people don't understand, A, what they're saying, and B, what their personal liability is. Hey, nice house. Shame if something would happen to it. Like, look what's going on in a lot of the litigation cases. The My Pillow guy, he's going to lose everything. And there are certain things that you really have to be very, very careful about. And you can't, if you're going to call someone a pedophile, you better have AI-proofed video of here's this guy committing a crime. Yeah. Otherwise, there are all sorts of different rules. Like whatever real property you have, whatever assets you have, like if you could turn around and say, this person has accused me of something that society is going to shun me. He's damaged my ability to earn a living. He's done this. This is completely false. And it was done with maliciousness. I want $100 million. And the court's going to say, that's a lot. We'll give you $10 million. That schmuck has a house that's worth $500,000 and a couple of cars. And now they're yours.
Yeah, but after you
spend $1 million in legal fees.
You have to be able to prove that you've been damaged, and I think that's hard to do.
There are certain things it's called libel per se or slander per se, where the legislation is we presume calling someone a sex abuser is automatically damaging to them.
How about this then? Let me know what you think.
By the way, if you disparage somebody professionally with false things, Ritholtz, he steals money from his clients. If someone ever said that to me, that's considered libel per se.
Yep.
You don't have to prove damage. I just have to prove this person said it publicly, and it's considered libel per se or slander per se. Libel is when you're writing it. Slander is when you're saying it. I should have called you
when I was reaching out to lawyers last week, because at the board meeting, I made comments and I said, you saw it, I said, they attack marginalized people. They attacked vulnerable populations, and they make them the aggressors. They take victims and make it seem like they're...
That's right. They love to do that.
Next year...
Do you know the people who said that?
Yes. I said, listen.
So it's really how much do you want to spend?
Hold on a second. Let me tell you what happened, for Christ's sake. I want your take on this. So I said next year it's going to be physically disadvantaged kids are attacking the big, strong athletes. That's what I said.
Right, that's right.
The next day, the town crier, the guy who leads all of these troglodytes into the fight by making shit up that's not happening, he went on Facebook and he said, I heard you say the word retard. I was aghast that you called students retards. And
you never said that.
Of course, I would never say that. And I told him,
and this is the guy who called you a pedophile?
And there's a tape of it. He then said I edited it myself out saying that. No one thinks I said that but him. He said it publicly that I said this, the R word.
Yeah.
He accused me, and I told him I'm going to sue him. I told him I'm going to sue him. But I don't know if I can.
I would find an attorney, and I would. You have to figure out how much is it worth to have this guy soil his underwear.
The guy is so hated in town. I don't know why an attorney wouldn't just do it for free.
It's worth exploring. See if you can find an attorney who has
I want to end him. I want to end him. Just like you talked about, the way that you were talking, that's exactly what I've been thinking and feeling for a very long time.
So you, first of all, you want to wait a week to let your emotions calm down. Second, you literally have to figure out, what do I want to spend on this? And when I had, I don't want to go into the details, but when I had an argument with someone who I used to work for, who I felt after I left crossed the line, I basically, first of all, I got to represent myself, which was a lot of fun. But secondly, I said to them, this is a bridge too far, and I'm giving you an option to walk away now. And if you don't, I'm going to fuck you up. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, that's how I'm feeling right now.
And it's the crazy. Here's the crazy thing. So lawsuits don't benefit anybody. Like, avoid a lawsuit like a plague is an old statement, because even when you win, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of mental energy, it's a lot of effort, and it's a lot of money. And don't you have better things to do with your time, money, and energy than that? However, there are certain circumstances where, I'm sorry, but what you have done is wholly unacceptable.
This is one of them.
What might make sense is to find other people that they've done this with, reach out to them, and see if everybody wants to kick in for lawyer and say, lawsuit, all managed by the same person. And it doesn't matter about the money. It matters that we're going to break you. You're not going to be able to own anything. We're going to destroy your credit rating. You won't be able to buy a house. You won't be able to live in your house. You won't be able to lease a car. Your credit cards are going to be toast. I need a public written apology, or, it's going to hurt. Brace yourself.
I will take you up on that advice. Let me ask you about more.
So much negativity to start this.
No, it's fine. I think it's fire. I like it.
By the way, I thought your presentation at the school board was literally, here's the blueprint for how everybody should deal with these idiots.
Thank you.
Like when somebody is creating a false or just made up non-issue and going after vulnerable kids, and then attacking people who are saying, hey, why are you going after these vulnerable kids? You stood your ground. You were obviously well prepared. You're very verbal and articulate, which not everybody has that skill set, but it was great. It was inspirational. Everybody go check out Pete's video.
Thank you.
From the school board.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't find out about this from you. My buddy Dave Pell included in one of his emails, and I'm like, son of a gun, that's Pete.
Yeah, I'm glad that you found out that way. That meant a lot to me. I appreciate it, to everybody who was, boosting it, because, you do feel a certain responsibility if you have the skill set and the ability to talk like that. And then even if you do, most people are scared to, but they've already come from my family, and I'm a public person. So it just seems weird if I'm going to go off about these issues into a microphone anywhere on TV, on this podcast, or anywhere else, and then not say anything in my local town when they're destroying. Like, that would be a pretty disingenuous. That would make me a disingenuous person, and why would anybody support my work? That's how I've always felt. So it seems like more of an obligation and a responsibility for someone like me to be the change that I want to see, and to, not let that shit happen in my own daughter's district.
The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
That's right.
I mean, that's the takeaway.
I'm motivated by those views and by the words of, the civil rights leaders who, we're standing on their shoulders. Unfortunately, we're the ones we've been waiting for.
which kind of, it kind of is the source of our problems.
Yeah.
We collectively are not really up for it.
I agree with you. In a lot of ways. We are fat and happy. We didn't have to deal with this stuff in a lot of ways growing up. And it kind of shocked us over the past 10 years or so that we would be confronting these problems. I mean, a lot of us thought we'd have a female president after the black president. And now we've we've taken voting rights from black folks and reproductive rights from women. Here we are, 2024.
When we were growing up, the really crazy people, whether they were, literally mentally challenged or just the tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theory wackadoos, they didn't have a way to coordinate. They didn't meet up. Yeah. Every town has a library. Yeah. Every library has a guy reading.
Now you can meet a Nazi
like crazy
anytime you want.
And now they all get to hook up on various,
one of the other
networks.
issues that it happens all over the country, and I think somebody really needs to, maybe it's me, I have to talk more about it, but because of the death of local journalism, not that it was ever great, because if it bleeds, it leads, you're going to report on those things more, but still, there were often journalists who would show up at town meetings and school meetings when things get controversial, and they still do to a certain extent as they were at ours, but the report they put out is this bullshit. And the point being, I can go on Facebook right now, Ritholtz, and create a narrative about a thing that happened in the school. Didn't happen. And and it will fly through this community and any community so fast before the truth even comes close to waking up. And you're just left on your heels trying to no, that didn't happen in school. Of course that didn't happen in school. Don't tell people that it's too late. Nobody can confront it. Nobody can, because we don't have local journalism. And, nobody trusts anybody. So you can just say whatever you want on Facebook and the community will think that there's clowns in the woods killing kids.
A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes.
But in your community, it can travel specifically locally. I'm talking hyper local. There are Facebook groups for every town in America.
Next door, there's a whole... And there's Facebook is too broad. How can we spread malignant cancer
even
locally
instead
of spreading it globally? It gets thinned out globally. If we concentrated in a district, we could kill a lot of people that way
Those are the stakes.
And as much as I love or used to love a lot of social media, a lot of it is just degenerated into a cancer. To say nothing of the impact on the constant focus on phones, on our overall happiness and what it's doing to kids. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, that's why we like to talk to you to get settled and get our bearings here on Earth One when it comes to the financial and economic issues that you write and talk about and deal with each and every day at your work, on your blog and your podcast. And this week, I reached out to you already before the market crashed, but you have a quick piece that basically the data that crash kind of was dependent on was lagging, was old. Explain to me what happened with markets this week. There's a drop.
So this is something I've literally been whining about since 2005. So just about 20 years. So this isn't local. This isn't recent. This isn't partisan. This is starting with the premise. There's a famous statistician and mathematician who was a professor named George Box. And he used to say, all models are wrong, but some are useful. Meaning when you try and depict a complex, dynamic world, whether it's, physics or economics, it doesn't matter, you're creating an imperfect version of that. But, sometimes that's useful. So when the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, does the monthly inflation report, the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, it's made up of a lot of different components. And it turns out one of the largest component, and it makes sense if you think about it, is shelter. What are you paying for rent? What are you paying for mortgage? And everything that goes with it, maintenance, utilities, blah. That's an important part of everybody's budget. The problem is that is very, very hard to manage. because I'm in this house now. September will be 10 years. What my mortgage was, what the value of the house is, what the replacement value, it's practically impossible to calculate it. All I know is every month the check goes out or electronic transfer goes out. 4 times a year, the taxes go out. Twice a year, the insurance goes out. And that's built into my budget, like pretty much everybody else. So how do you measure that? Well, the way they used to measure it is they would survey a few thousand people and say, hypothetically, if you were going to rent out your house to somebody, let's say you had a different house that you lived in, and instead of selling your house, you were going to rent it out to a neighbor to live there, what would you charge them? Has that gone up in the past few months? Has it gone down? How do we now they use a bunch of other actual measurements of transactions, but you can imagine interviewing thousands of people, getting that data together, cleaning it up, collating it, organizing it. It takes a while, as well as tracking down all these transactions. I was actually wrong. I just interviewed Bill Dudley, this week's Masters in Business, former New York Federal Reserve president, and I said, we were talking about this, and I'm like, I'm under the assumption this data is about 3 to 6 months old. It's like a quarter or two. He's like, oh, no, takes much. He was at the New York Fed. He was at the Federal Reserve. It was his first job as an economist before he went to Goldman Sachs for 20 years, then came back to New York Fed. So he really knows the inner workings of the Federal Reserve in D.C. and the New York Fed. And he said, oh, no, that data is so slow to assemble and come together. It's more like 6 months to a year. So the CPI data that comes out earlier this week shows a much hotter inflation number. Now, hotter, not like it was in June 2022 of over 9%, but we've fallen down to low 3s, high 2-point-something%. But the past few months, the most elevated part has been shelter, whether it's rental or purchase. That's what it's showing. Remember, inflation is not measuring the absolute price. It's measuring the rate of change. How fast are prices going up? And real-time measures, things like the apartment list index or Zillow index, shows that for the past few months, rents and home prices have been softening. They've been falling. Not even disinflation, deflation. They've been going down. But the way the BLS assembles this model, the data they're using is showing housing prices still going up. And so of this hotter than expected number, 2/3 of it, 2.1 out of 3.1, is shelter. And that's just, that is just a old, lagging, a year ago data that somehow the market looked at and said, oh, this means that the economy is too hot and the Fed's not going to cut and the cost of capital is going to be higher and it's going to, affect profits. And they sold off hard. And I'm watching over the past couple of days. I said, if I was a trader, I'm a buyer here, because as people figure out that this is old laggy data, as folks, because when you watch business television and they talk about it, it's like watching politics. Nobody talks about the policies or the meaning to the average person in the street. They're just talking about the horse race. Oh, hotter than expected, better than the whisper number, whatever the nonsense is. Business and markets are covered like it's a football game. And that is, I guess if you're a 24-hour news channel, you got to gin up interest somehow. Right. But for most of us, it's meaningless noise.
But yet, even without the noise that you're referring to, the consumer price index inflation measures are based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics stats. And so when that comes out and it says that January CPI for all items rose 0.3%, what else do you need? What else do you need to know as an investor? All this other stuff that you just explained to us isn't present in that report. So as an investor, you see that and you react to that. What's wrong?
So Howard Marks of Oak Tree Capital.
Right? Is that what happened? Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. Howard Marks of Oak Tree Capital, great investor, very savvy guy, says, anybody can do first level thinking, but you need second and third level thinking if you want to be a long-term successful investor.
That's why we have you.
What's second and third level thinking? Well, here's the number. 0.3 in a month means it's 0.36 for the year, right? You extrapolate that out for 12 months. But the next level is, hey, this means that the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, the Fed doesn't have to cut. This is really, it's a hot economy. Inflation might resurge. All these bad things are going to come out of this. Now, when I see that data, I'm like, so people are going to get it wrong for a while. And when they eventually figure it out, right? And that's the fascinating thing about markets. It's not who's right or wrong. It's, it's been described as over the short term, markets are a voting contest, but over the long term, it's a weighing contest. So in the beginning, the beauty contest is, what does everybody think? You get a consensus and off it goes. But the consensus is frequently wrong, and it takes a while for that to come around. So ironically, today we get consumer spending. Not only was consumer spending much softer than expected because of high interest rates, high credit card costs, people are buying fewer cars, fewer homes, they're spending less on their credit cards, right? You get, remember, everything that comes in is, you get the initial data and then you get the subsequent revised and updated data as more information comes in, and then you get the final data. And so when we look at December, which was such a hot month, turned out to be much softer, not bad, but nowhere near as hot as thought. So January was weak, December was worse than previously reported, November was worse than previously reported. And so now you have this dueling narrative between, is the BLS model right, or is the for CPI, for inflation, or is the model for consumer spending right? And my guess is the consumer spending model is right because, and that comes from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, not the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it's two different groups. But I think everybody was locked down for 2 years. They're accumulating cash, they're accumulating savings. Remember, 2022 was the summer of revenge travel. And then, people got vaxxed up. And then 2023, everyone went crazy. That bolt is shot. We've okay, now let's get back to normal. We've experienced our pent up demand from the lockdown. Everybody worked that out. And now we could kind of go back to pre-pandemic sort of normal life with a little more remote work and a little less focus on coming into the office. But all the things that we couldn't get 3 years ago, now you could get, and things are sort of moderating, right? When you tell people you can't get a watch, well, everybody runs out and wants that watch and the prices go up. And it's like, oh, now you could get that watch at list price. You don't have to pay over list. Or you get a car. You don't have to wait 2 years and pay 20% over list.
So you also talked about and wrote a piece about the misery index. This title is, what does the misery index say about the 2024 election, which is a really interesting piece. And first and foremost, what is the misery index? That's a real thing.
So the misery index has been around for a while. It was created, I want to say it was created in the 60s or the 70s. I forgot the name of the economist who created it. Arthur Oken, that's right, in the 1970s. But simply, you add up the unemployment rate with inflation rate, so it's U3 unemployment, for those of you playing along at home, the CPI number, and those two numbers gives you a snapshot of the economic distress is being felt in the country. So when Carter was in office and inflation had ticked up to 7-8% and unemployment had ticked up to 9, the misery index was like somewhere around 20. I mean, it's just huge. And now it's like 6 or 7. I mean, if you look at the average for the past 30 years, and we've had a pretty good economic run since 1990. All right, there was a little financial crisis right in the middle of it, and a dot-com implosion and a COVID lockdown. But generally speaking, it's been a pretty good 30-year run. I want to say we averaged 9, 10, 11, something like that. And we're about almost half that. It's really quite amazing. the lower inflation numbers go, the lower unemployment goes. So everybody wants a job, has a job. While inflation spiked during the lockdown for reasons directly related to the inability to get certain items, the supply chain snarls, and the CARES Act 1, 2, and 3, which was a massive fiscal stimulus, the first two under Trump, the third one under Biden, all three of those contributed to inflation. And so you end up with a situation that as this comes back down, it means people aren't feeling that sort of stress. Whoever wants a job can get a job. Nobody's happy on the fact that the absolute prices have gone up. Everything seems to be more expensive than it was, but the rate of change is falling, and hopefully prices start to fall.
But do prices start to fall on the things that people really see and feel and buy? Housing, automobiles, food?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm losing my voice. It's been going on and off all week. Hold on a sec. Good to be healthy.
Take your time. Jesus.
Let's see if that does anything.
Jesus.
You'll edit this right out.
No, that part I'm keeping in.
So, in the winter, it's just so dry in the house. And I have the house humidifier running.
I thought you had that guy that followed you around with moisture.
That's right.
What's his name again? Benjamin? I think
a mister.
A mister. He just has an actual human that mists you all day long. Okay, so
soda. You get the thanks. So it's what were we talking about?
Well, the misery index and getting back to the history of how.
So if you want a job, you can get a job. The really terrible inflation that we saw in 21 and 22 that I blamed like 20 different sources. Biden both inherited it and contributed to it, but it was mostly a result of the pandemic. It's you lock people in their house and don't let them leave. You shift us from a services economy to a goods economy. Companies can't ramp up their production fast enough. Which, by the way, I was originally skeptical about so-called greedflation, but the evidence is now overwhelming.
Explain that greedflation, the idea that corporate, companies are pricing things purposely.
Right. So there's a balance between supply and demand.
Right.
And what, a century of economic research tells us is there's an optimal level of price range relative to volume that will maximize your revenue and profits, right? If you raise your prices too high, you'll still sell, but you'll sell fewer and therefore have less revenue. And if you make your goods too cheap, well, you'll sell a lot more of them, but there'll be no profit margin. So everybody who sells a product or a service is guided by how do we balance the need for volume and profitability? Some companies have no limitations on that. They're few and far between. The typical examples are Apple and Ferrari. Ferrari, and you could probably throw Rolex into that group. If Ferrari could make another 2,000 cars a year, they sell, like 10,000 cars a year. They would sell them at an average cost of $300,000 each.
Damn.
Apple, what is this is the iPhone. I think this is the Pro Max 15. It's like $1,200. Like, I am price insensitive. I just give me the latest, greatest thing. I go out and buy it, and it's just a cost I have to eat, and I don't even think about
real
it.
Snob. You're
but
real arrogant,
I'm not
rich snob.
when I'm not that price sensitive for $1,000 product. They know pricing it at $1,200 plus whatever subsidy you get from Verizon plus this plus that. They'll sell X units. If they make it cheaper, they'll sell more. If they make it more expensive, they'll sell Y.
Right.
They kind of like this being a sort of premium product that, Scott Galloway used to show this great chart of Manhattan, of New York, where the outer rings showing like New Jersey and the outer boroughs were yellow. Those were all the Android phones for the poor.
Oh, really?
And then the Manhattan had a blue circle, and that was the wealthy New Yorkers who have iPhones. And then there was like a little tiny yellow dot in the middle, which were the diehards still holding on to their BlackBerries. That's like 5-7 years ago. Now iPhone dominates just about everything. Android sells more phones, but Apple captures 90%, some crazy number of the profit. So that's a perfect example. You make the Android, you give away the Android operating system for free. You make no profit, but maybe it hooks you into the Google infrastructure. But the money is made by LG and Samsung and whoever's,
manufacturing the phones.
I think I saw a stat that says Samsung makes more money on the chips that they sell to Apple in an Apple phone than Samsung makes on their own phones.
Oh, that's interesting, if true.
I'm pretty sure that at least it used to be true.
Let me ask you about something else that you retweeted at Ritholtz. Some guy, Nick Wiley, dollars and
Nick is our quant at the firm. He's
great
Stanford grad, numbers wizard, operating. Well, he's really great.
So he tweeted, I have a few friends that are millionaires in their early 30s. None of them follow a strict morning routine, track their expenses, have an elaborate note-taking system. All of them own significant equity in a company and sold that equity. Makes you think. What's he commenting on? These trends, these podcasts, these ideas that to be successful as an investor, to be a wealthy person, you got to get up at 4 a.m. and you got to. Is that? I mean, I don't follow those types of things very, very closely. Those entrepreneurial type podcasts. And so, what's he talking about? And
so there's a handful of influencers and podcasters and TikTokers, and they kind of misunderstand causation. Hey, this billionaire does this, so if you do this, you'll become a billionaire.
Well, like Tim Ferriss is pretty well respected in aggregating successful. No,
I mean,
or people like
I don't
him.
think he's one of these crazy influencers. Although, to his credit, he treated his body as a lab experiment and said, "What do I have to do to get healthier, more fit, hit my ideal weight, hit my ideal strength?" And his first book was all about that. And to me, the fascinating thing about that was, here's a guy who's essentially running a series of experiments on himself and quite successfully. But there's like a whole school. There are lots of these schools that find their way onto social media. Nick and I both hate the early retirement. Like, just save up $1 million. Don't do anything in your 20s and 30s. Save $1 million, retire at 37, and enjoy the rest of your life. And I always used to push back at this. And I literally, one day, I'm reading one of these. It's called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. And there's a Q&A part, and somebody is writing in who's retired early. They have a bunch of guests that are staying at their house, but these folks are taking long, hot showers, and I don't know what it's going to cost me. And I'm like, let me stop you right there. You are not financially independent if a house guest in a shower for 10 minutes too long is going to ruin your budget. Like, wait, you want to do nothing but work and save money in your 20s? You should be going out and having some fun in your 20s. Learning about the world, learning about yourself, building a network of people. Like, to just be I'm not going to go out to eat, I'm not going to go to shows, I'm not going to socialize. Wait, what is this idiocy about? And then so that's one thing. And the concept of, if you follow these CEO routines, these millionaire or billionaire routines, get up at 4:30 in the morning, work out, write 100 blog posts at 6 a.m., do this, do that. Like, it sort of presupposes that we're all the same, that there's no variation amongst people, that what works for you is going to work for me and vice versa.
Yeah, I hate it.
It's just, now, some of these folks have a real substantial following, and there's a group of, so where everything goes askew is there's a number of people in the influencer space, in the podcast or interviewer space, that, interview really interesting people, right? Like Harvard professor I keep calling him Albert Brooks. Arthur Brooks was the column at The Atlantic, a thing about.
It's a lot of credit.
But if you listen to him, if you like a lot of what he said, it's social science. It's not physics, but it's pretty influential that if you want to build a life that is satisfying, and he talks about a lot of stuff that overlaps with you, that, find work that is satisfying, have a relationship that brings both of you joy and happiness. And
a lot of relationships, community in general, friends.
Right.
Yeah.
And none of this stuff is really out there. But when you find someone who structures it and organizes it in a specific way and puts it into a context, it's very digestible. That's very different. The further, not to go all college philosophy on you, but one of the things we learn in Plato's Cave in Philosophy 101 is there's an ideal version of everything, and then there are shadows of it. And the further you get away from the idealized version of this is a bottle, and in Plato's Cave, there is an ideal bottle, the perfect bottle, however you want to define it. But every reflection of it, every shadow of it is a little different, a little less perfect, and on you go. So one of my favorite examples, I wrote a screed about this. So a lot of the personal finance people will tell you, never buy a sports car, don't buy a boat. And it just starts to get so first of all, they leave out the most important part of that, which is unless you can afford it. If you can afford it, go buy whatever the fuck you want. It's nobody's business. Hey, if buying miniature collections of Shogun Samurais brings you joy, wouldn't bring me joy, but if it brings you joy and you can afford it, go buy it. It's nobody else's business. So it gets so ridiculous. I'm trying to remember. Susie Orman said, if you buy Starbucks cappuccino, you're pissing away $2 million. Don't buy cappuccino. Go buy a fucking latte. What are you kidding me? If your retirement is dependent on skipping a $5 latte, you have other financial concerns to take care of first. And the latte isn't it. By the way, when you looked at her numbers, she assumes instead of buying a latte, put that $5 into the stock market every day. And by the time you retire, it'll be $3 million. Right. And when you look at the math, it's not even close.
Yeah.
To say nothing that, or the $2 million she promised you is 40 years from now. So just to give you a little context, what was something worth in 1984? You could retire with $100,000 in 1984. Today, $100,000 isn't a lot. So just every, sleight of hand, nonsensical thing. And you see that in these various, do this, do that, do that. It's you know what? Here's a wacky idea. Why don't you figure out what works for you as a person? What do you figure out what brings you satisfaction, brings you contentment, brings you happiness that allows you to earn a decent living? And, you may not get that at 21. Here, I love these. I'm going to show you something. But I figured out that having one of these dials prevents me from doom scrolling. Having one of these tiles allows me to say, I'm going to spend 7 minutes working on this crap, and I'm going to put it aside and take the dogs out for a walk. Because otherwise, left to my own devices, my natural instinct is to
timer. You have a timer that you set.
Literally a friggin' time. And this one broke.
Wow.
It still works, but the stand broke. So I have a short timer and a long time. They're $9 on Amazon.
I've been doing that. I think what you're talking about myself, which is I'll say, I'll tell my smart speaker, whatever, to set a timer for 30 minutes or an hour. And I know that I have to get certain things done, and it holds me accountable to get it done within that time period and not get distracted very easily by, I think that's what you're saying.
Alexa, set a timer for 10 minutes so I could get the hell off of Pete's show.
Right. Well, I have mine has a British accent.
So I find these are more useful than those, but what do you want?
That's a little timer.
So all right.
Wow, she's really judgmental to you.
Yeah, she very much is. So I usually have it muted, and I forgot to mute it. So anyway, so you're mentioning the thing I retweeted by Nick.
Well, Yeah, the point is
these broad, like, if you do this, you will become a billionaire. Like, I'm amazed at how much bullshit is just
the vast
everywhere.
majority of people who are billionaires by 30 are because they invested in something. They own significant equity in a company and sold that. But more importantly, what I want to assume
there are.
Well, I think that if you to his point, the thing that gets left out of the tweet, which made me curious, is if you owned a significant equity in a company and sold that equity, and that's what made you a millionaire, and you by the age of 30, what is the correlation of those people to inherited wealth? Like, most people don't have the capital to make a large investment that they can somehow sell.
Well,
for that
it doesn't
kind of
have to be an investment. It could be your own work product. You come up with an app, you come up with an idea. And by the way, that again is a mix of people, primarily people from the STEM world, science, technology, engineering, and math, who have some college education. Many of them have grad education. So it probably skews to a little more wealthier than the average person. But there's lots of, there's all these stories of people come up with an idea, create a business, and they do really well. By the way, you don't have to sell your company and put $1 million in the bank and do whatever you're going to do. You build a business, it throws off a decent revenue for you and it's satisfying. There's no obligation to IPO or cash out. How about this? Live your life, enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, and stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. I know this is like shockingly rational, but so all that, my next book is going to be called, if I get it through the publisher, I'm going to call it Debunking Bullshit, because
you've been doing it for years.
I spend so much time every now and then. So the other day I get an email from a client. Hey, I'm a little concerned. Credit card debt is at all-time highs. It's at $3 trillion. And my answer is always, so first, classic case of denominator blindness. You're giving me one number out of context for both that number, and since it's debt, what matters is your ability to service the debt, not the debt itself. So I'm like, yeah, credit card debt's at all-time high. You know what else is at all-time high? The U.S. economy. You know what else is at all-time high? U.S. population. You know what else is all-time high? U.S. consumer spending. So having told you those things, are you as concerned about consumer debt? He's like, well, I'm a little less concerned. All right, so now let's look at the U.S. consumers' ability to service their debt. Here's a chart from the St. Louis Federal Reserve, Fred, their data services group, and its discretionary income service ability to service debt. It's pretty close to all-time lows. The number of defaults relative to debt are almost at all-time lows. The bottom was in the middle of the pandemic when people couldn't buy anything and they were getting government checks. But it's still, at 30, it's not all-time lows. It's at like 40-year lows since they've been running this series where they're looking at how much debt is there for consumers and how much do they have the ability to service that debt. So, we live in a world that's just filled with people trying to separate you from their money, from your money. Salesmen and grifters and just legitimate people trying to sell you a product. And they don't always use the most honest advertising. And credit card debt is a great example of that. The federal deficit is a perfect example of that. My entire adult life, I have heard, listen, if we don't get the deficit under control, it's going to cause inflation to skyrocket. It's going to crush the U.S. dollar. It'll crowd out private capital, so we won't have any money to invest in private companies. Uncle Sam won't be able to borrow money, or if Uncle Sam can borrow money, it'll be at really high rates. And I've heard that since the 1970s and 80s, and none of it has become true. Not a one. The U.S. dollar is not only one of the strongest currencies in the world, it's the reserve currency. The federal government can borrow money pretty damn cheaply compared to the rest of the world. There's just an endless amount of money for private capital, and we've had 2 inflation spikes in the past 30 years, one caused by the housing collapse and the financial crisis, right, and the most recent one caused by the pandemic.
COVID, yeah.
So nothing, and what always shocks me is nobody said to any of these people when they go on TV, well, sir, you've been wrong about this for 50 years. Everything you've warned us would happen has not happened.
Right.
why should we listen to anything you say? If you were a fund manager and you lost money every year for 50 years, who is giving you their retirement funds? But that's who these people are. I have the same argument with people.
If you pitch and lose every game, if you miss every field,
you're going to lose that slot. How are you going to be the starting pitcher if you suck and lose every time?
You shared this as well by Ben Carlson, whoever that is. Finance is one of the only industries where people can be wrong about everything all the time, yet investors still listen to their opinions. Sir, you've been wrong about the economy and financial markets for 15 years. Care to tell us what you think will happen next? Basically what you just said.
Ben is the head of institutional trading at institutional investing at my firm. Great. And you, by the way, I love the fact that I work somewhere where I get to surround myself with some of the smartest sons of bitches out there. Each of these guys are just so insightful, so intuitive. And these are not like, oh, they've been in the markets for 90 years. This is grizzled.
These are young
Ben
people.
is late 30s. I think Nick just turned 30. These are like smart young people who look at the data and say, oh, now I'd like to think I helped set the tone. I've been writing this crap for so long. They know all my BS. They've heard it so many times. But on their own, these are just savvy, smart people who figured things out. It's you know, to bring this up to most recent events, you and I talked about George Santos was my congressman, and I feel really bad about giving him that big check a couple of years ago.
Yeah, what were you thinking? Well, you thought he was somebody else.
He kind of snuck in the, everybody was focused on Trump's reelection in 2020. He kind of snuck in below the radar because the New York Democrats were running terrible campaigns. All you have to do is look at the current White House and say, who's in charge of comms? I loved what Jon Stewart said on Monday.
Oh, look at you.
Fire them all. But anyway, so we heard that the open seat for a special election on Tuesday. We heard this is neck and neck race. This is suburban New York. So Santos won by 8 in a district that Biden won by 4. And, this is going to bode really poorly for the Democrats. And it's this woman who used to be a Democrat, but is a former Israeli soldier is here. And I got to give Tom Suozzi a lot of credit for ignoring the national Democrats and basically saying she's beating him over the head with immigration.
Yep.
And he just turned around and said, yeah, let's do something to fix it. Let's pass some legislation that solves all these immigration problems. Oh, wait, we did that, except the House, the Republican House, won't let us bring it in. And he hammered her on that.
Yep.
He hammered her on Roe. He raised a ton of money. He was door to door. He was very local. And he basically said, so right up until the election, the polls are neck and neck. We can't tell. He wins by over 8%. He completely reverses the Santos victory. And it's just another example of everybody is full of crap. They think they know what the future holds. They don't. And, when people tell you what's going to happen, they're selling you something and they want you to buy into it. So for the media, it's clicks and attention. They never. So I asked this question to somebody. They got very insulted. They drumming about the presidential polls, November, December, January. I'm like, hey, just out of curiosity, what is the forecasting accuracy of polls this far out? How much do they tell you about who's going to win 6 months, 9 months, 12 months in advance?
0%. You told me last time you were on the show, and it stuck with me, and I've said it over and over and over.
And they get really insulted, and I'm like, listen, if, like what Ben said, if someone comes on TV and says, stop timer, Alexa, that was your 10 minutes.
Oh, you're done. We're done here.
Alexa, stop timer. You have to phrase it properly.
Right. She's insubordinate.
Yeah, no, she's just not AI, not very smart.
She makes a lot of predictions herself.
Does she? So anyway, all this stuff is, on the next book I'm going to put together. We've talked about William Goldman, who wrote Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, The Princess Bride. He did the screenplay for Marathon Man. He in one of his books, he tells a story. Nobody knows anything. All the studios passed on Star Wars. They all passed on Indiana Jones. I recently did a blog post. the stunt coordinators and special effect coordinators and Keanu Reeves could not get the first John Wick movie made. The stunt coordinator and special effects coordinator from The Matrix, huge successful series, and Keanu Reeves couldn't get John Wick made. So Reeves said, I'll fund it myself. And I think he put up $10 million. So the first movie, and by the way, this is a brand of Hong Kong movies called Gun Fu. It's not Kung Fu, it's Gun Fu. And it's very popular in Hong Kong. And he's obviously an action star and he's a fan of the genre. Hey, let's bring this to America. Nobody got it. He puts up whatever it was, $8 million. The first movie makes $90 million. By the way, after they get the movie made, they can't get a distributor. No one wants to review it. The first movie makes like 80 or 90, like 10x's money. The next movie makes almost $200 million. The third makes over 400 or the 400. There's a fourth one coming out. The franchise is now worth $1 billion. Nobody in Hollywood could figure out, oh, this is successful over here. And more recently, I wrote about Squid Game. Squid Game is the single most successful Netflix series. By far, it's 2 billion hours streamed. Number 2 is like 780 million. It's by a factor of 3. Seen it. Guy was carrying around the script on his laptop for 10 years, couldn't get it made. Finally decided to direct it himself, and Netflix took a shot at it, and it's wildly successful. So all these experts running around telling you what's going on, to quote, is it Paul Graham? I'm trying to remember his name. Experts have an expertise in how the world used to be, right? Because they spend 10 years studying something and they're looking at history. And now how does that past history really give you insight as to what's coming next? It turns out it really doesn't. So I get annoyed at these people who seem to think they know what's going on. And I get frustrated with the media for not holding their feet to the fire.
Well, you're always going to, but you are a source of media yourself, which is why I like to talk to you. And I try
really hard to not do that.
Yeah, that's why people have always liked you. They don't like you. They think you're an arrogant, rich prick, but you're right. You're right with your analysis.
I was not rich most of my life.
The way that you present things can be couched in arrogance and wealth and privilege, but you're not wrong.
I mean, I grew up, pretty hard scrabble. I put myself through college and worked my way through college and grad school. So I bring a little bit of that, no silver spoon.
Sure. Tell us about your watch collection and your Porsche with the electric motor. There was a listener who reached out to me who's very concerned that you didn't understand the amount of horsepower you now had in your car. He's legitimately worried that you were going to kill yourself. And I said, listen, I think your concern is valid because I've been in the car with him.
Not that car.
Several times. I know I've been in weaker cars with you where you drive
weaker cars, like a just not electric
cars. You drive like a maniac. You feel your anger comes through.
No,
we're very worried that you put a rocket ship engine in a very light vehicle.
So the amazing thing is when that car first came out, it was like 200 horsepower. Like it's a Toyota Corolla. And it was thought of as like a big sports car. And I picked
You're talking about a Porsche.
I'm talking about a Porsche 911 from 1987 that I rescued from. It was heading to the junkyard before I rescued it and said, hey, for fun, let's take the engine and gas tank out and drop some batteries in.
Fun.
And
good fun.
And I haven't gotten it back. The motor just went in and now you got to do all the software tweaking. So I'm waiting for it to come back. It's going to be about 420 horsepower. So it's about double
that car is not supposed to have
what it started with.
That car is not made to have that kind of power.
I upgraded the brakes. I upgraded
you'll be fine
tires.
then. Oh, you upgraded the brakes. You're good. Do you have a test driver? One of those young kids in your office?
I don't even think that car is in like my top 5 in terms of horsepower. I have to think about it.
Yeah, but to match the weight of its frame.
3. What's that?
Yeah, but in terms of the
you reinforce the frame. There's really. I did a post on it and said, there was a little bit of rust, and they're like, you got to repair this rust because the battery has to be supported. Yeah. The body will torque. You're doubling the horsepower. So I'm prepping the car to do. And by the way, someone said to me, why don't you just go out and buy a new EV?
Sure.
Like, well, because
that's not fun.
That's not right. And where I live, and I'm adjacent to the really nice neighborhood across the street.
Please.
Like you saw the houses on the other side.
I've been to your house.
My house is nice, but my house is 3,800 square feet. The house across the street from me is like 15,000.
You need more space.
Right. So I don't. It's just me and my wife and the dogs.
When I was at your house,
we're fine here.
I literally was eyeing places for my stuff. I was like, this is just unused. I've got a whole baseball
card collection. We bought the house in like 2014 when they were giving houses away. This was a War of the Roses divorce that it was a disaster. Right. And if it was a nice house, we couldn't afford it. We slowly, every year, did a different project: the roof, the kitchen, the windows, the furnace. We converted to gas from oil.
The elevator, the gun turret.
In this neighborhood, I jokingly say Porsche 911s are like Camrys. Like I'm the poor guy in the neighborhood.
There it is. That's what we were waiting for. That type
I'm the can you spare a couple change in the neighborhood? And so the thought of going out and buying first of all, I'm not a Porsche guy, but second,
strike me as
they're Camrys. They're like nothing.
Okay.
So, but getting a 80s era Porsche and converting it to electric, one of one, my friend, the only one in New York State.
We've had enough. We've heard enough. Heard enough from you.
And I don't have a lot of watches. I have a couple of watches.
Love it. Love putting them on his heels.
I'm fascinated.
How much is
I've
that
had
shirt?
Most of these watches most of my life.
How much is that shirt you're wearing?
I don't know. It's like a regular. It's a Ralph Lauren. It's probably $60, $70.
All right. Well,
if you're jealous of this shirt, you need. I'm not out with a personal shopper going to Neiman Marcus dropping $20,000 on pants. That's not who I am.
You let go of that kid? What happened to Chad?
That is not my MO. You know me well enough. You
literally told me before I hit record, I have to go in an hour because I have to get back to my personal shopper who's got to report back.
No, my masseuse is coming.
I mistook it. Thank you, my friend.
I actually just have to prep for next week's podcast, and then I'm going to tap out and let my voice recover because last week I had a crazy week.
Well, let me get out a violin. Thank you for using some of your voice. Wait till you heard about my last. Did you get called a pedophile? Because that was my week. Let me thank you for giving us your voice. I appreciate it. I'm going to hit stop. Here we go.
My pleasure.
Yeah, there he goes, Barry Ritholtz. Almost an hour with Barry Ritholtz. I hope you appreciated that, learned something from it, as I always do in every conversation I have with Ritholtz. That's all I've got for you today. You bumblebees here at the end. I love you. Hope to see you in Vegas. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Go write a rating and review over on iTunes, Spotify. John Carroll, sorry to talk over you. Take us out, brother.
When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. Since the to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.